Beloveds, welcome to Nurture the Soul on a Wednesday. I am your host today, Reverend Ellie Hutchison, and I am the Minister for Congregational and Community Engagement at the national setting of the United Church of Christ, and I'm a part of the Faith Info team. Nurture the Soul is a weekly webinar that provides our local churches and faith practitioners with multitudes of practical, educational, innovative, and formational resources to engage with the critical topics of our time, to center care, and to center the education for the people of God. From cultural and community organizing to congregational leadership, from worship and theology to resourcing our small and rural churches, and from ministry with our youth and children to a wide range of justice issues, we feature guest artists, authors, pastors, theologians, and key leaders. Nurture the Soul likes to stay current with how the gospel is alive for us, each of us in this time. We hope that this is a space for connection, community, and nurture, because we believe in the collective movement towards the world that God imagined for all of us. While normally our Nurture the Soul series is on Thursdays at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we offer special offerings from time to time. And you can find a full list of our upcoming digital program offerings at ucc.org/events or on any and all of our social media platforms. And friends, if these conversations move you, if what is offered helps to enhance your ministry or even your spirit, please consider donating towards the annual fund of the United Church of Christ. And you can do that by texting the letters UCC to the numbers 41444. Your prayerful and financial support helps programs like this in the essential work of the United Church of Christ. And we want to thank you for supporting us. And more importantly, thank you for being with us today. Today is one of those special offerings that I talked about, and we are planning to share a bunch between now and post-election series. Today's offering highlights a conference immersion trip to the Rio Grande Valley, and we are blessed with personal stories shared by those who participated in this immersion opportunity. The Central Pacific Conference Immigrant Welcome Network supported a 9-person ecumenical delegation to the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. And they did that in partnership with the RGV Border Immersion Mission Project. The delegation participants who are with us today are Reverend Keren Frazier, who is with the UCC in West Seattle, Washington, Pastor Lucas, who is with our Faith Lutheran, Caldwell, Indiana, I believe that is correct, and then Reverend Lopez, who is with the United Church of Christ in Rio Grande Valley, and then Pastora Keren Rodriguez, who is UMCC pastor in Aloha, Oregon, and is also the organizer for our Oregon Interfaith Movement for Justice, Immigrant Justice. Whew, great titles for amazing people. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Reverend Tyler Connoley, and I invite each of you to share any questions that you may have in our Q&A feature that will appear at the bottom of your screen. It looks like a little dialogue bubble that pops up above a cartoon head, and it has a question mark in it. And when you click on that, you can go ahead and type in your question. We also have a chat feature. Our chat feature is another little dialogue button with 3 little dots, otherwise known as ellipses. You can click in that, and please do share where you are zooming in from. We welcome you. And Tyler, I welcome you and all of today's participants to go ahead and turn their cameras on, make themselves present in the space.
Thank you, Reverend Allie. It's so good to be here with all of you. I am the Reverend Tyler Connolly. I'm the conference minister for the Central Pacific Conference of the United Church of Christ. My pronouns are they or he. That's order of preference. I prefer they. I put up with he. And I was the convener of sorts for this trip. when our immigrant welcoming churches of the Central Pacific Conference decided that they wanted to have a border delegation to go to the border before the election, they knew that this election was going to include a lot of lies about people crossing the border, about immigrants and refugees. And they really wanted to have people who could amplify the voices of those who were migrants and asylum seekers, and also those who were supporting migrants and asylum seekers. And in particular, in the part of our border in Brownsville, Texas, and the Rio Grande Valley. And so they asked me to help put together a delegation for this trip. And the delegation included representatives from 4 conferences, and those 3 denominations, 9 local churches, and together the 9 of us represented 8 different states. And then we also included, besides being local churches and conferences and synods and such, we also had representatives from 2 organizations that are not a conference or church, and those were the UCC Colectivo of Latin Ministries and the Interfaith Movement for Immigrant and Refugee Justice. And so this was one of the things that was beautiful about this trip, was that we were people from multiple places, from multiple ecumenical backgrounds, and that we were coming together to foster stronger connections and amplify the prophetic voice of people in the Rio Grande Valley, and also of the people in communities that are welcoming communities in the North. And several of our delegation represented organizations or churches that were welcoming organizations or welcoming churches in the North. And one just moment for me, well, 2 things that I want to highlight from my experience. One is that throughout the weekend, as we came across women who were supporting people who were moving from one country to another, I kept thinking of Ruth and Naomi, and of Ruth, who was a refugee, who sought refuge in Bethlehem when there was a famine in her country, and of the people who helped her to settle and build a family, and of the ways that we build family and have opportunities to expand love when people move from one country to another. And of all of the people who, Boaz and others who supported Ruth and made it possible for her to build a home. And that is what folks are doing along the Rio Grande Valley, south of the border and north of the border, and in all of the places where people are being welcomed. And, the story of Ruth is that she became the grandmother of David, King David, and was also listed as one of the ancestors of Jesus. And whenever I came across someone, I don't know what their future might be or who their family will become, but I know from our sacred texts that we become family in this way when we move across borders. And that for me was a refrain that just kept coming up over and over again as I visited with folks. And then one other story quickly that I want to share is that we met a man from Haiti who had Parkinson's, and he reminded me so much of my father, who has Parkinson's. And my sister and I have been trying to figure out how we're going to get my father on a plane to get him to a conference that he's been invited to. And I saw this man with his children, and I thought, these people have walked across multiple countries together. And my sister and I just want to be able to get our father on a plane to get him to a conference. What would it take what would it require internally to be able, and what would you need to be fleeing in order to take the journey of taking your father, who has Parkinson's, across multiple borders by foot in order to find life? And that particular man, and because of Global Ministries and my opportunity to go on a person-to-person pilgrimage, I was able to speak to him in his native language, and because I had visited Haiti, and I was able to say bonjour, and the way that his face lit up, that particular encounter was profound for me, and just a reminder of what this is all about. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Reverend Ali Lopez to talk about the RGV, UCC RGV, and who welcomed us at the border.
Yes, Reverend Tyler, thank you so much for the introduction and letting us know about your experience. You visited with us some of the groups that we support. The United Church of Christ of the Rio Grande Valley started just last week. We turned our first birthday, but the reality is that we have been working in the border for several years. I want to say that 2017, 18, 19, we started to see something different in our region, where migrants were starting to stay in Mexico without being able to cross as naturally as we have felt for many, many years. It was never so upfront to our community. And our community reacted pretty quickly, creating organizations to bring food and shelter and support to the migrants being left at the border. And it became worse and worse and worse with the years. And around the same time, I began my journey to become a minister with the United Church of Christ and moved to Dallas, where we had the blessing to be granted some grants to go into Mexico and support the groups that were already doing the work, bringing hygiene kits, food, medications, and so forth. And it was during that time, during that work, that we started what has become the foundation of the United Church of Christ here in the border. And at the same time, we living in Dallas, coming back and forward, we understood that there was a big misinformation of the reality happening here, from the news to even Hispanics and other leaderships other leaders in our community who were not aware of the true difficulties and realities. And we began a border immersion trips. We have welcomed several churches and organizations that will come with us, and we will bring them to the different points, as we brought you guys to Clinic Lulu, Casa Migrante in Mexico, where we bring medications and other support for them as they welcome thousands of migrants every year as they wait for now the process of waiting in Mexico to be able to cross into the United States, providing all kinds of services, from mental health services and support to medications and healthcare. And also we showed them the border wall and how it has separated a community that was free for thousands of years to cross the border and meet with family and be back and forward in our cultural exchange that happens here in the Valley constantly. And the opportunity to talk to some of the people on the journey that brought us to the border, the journey that brought us to help other people who are crossing the border, and to come to understand that there's no high levels of crime happening in our community because of migrants. Come to understand that these are just humans that are seeking the same thing that we are all seeking, which is a place where we can live and thrive and have the opportunity to be. And there's no any other agenda other than to find a place where they can live peacefully. So I am grateful for all of you who volunteer and came here and the opportunity to lead you into this journey. And I'm looking forward to hear more of the experiences that you all share during this journey. And I pass it on to Tyler.
Now we'll get to hear from Reverend Keren Fraser.
It's good to see everybody today, and a privilege to be invited in this gathering, but also to have been invited by Reverend Tyler and Reverend Ali to go on this journey. I am the associate pastor at Fulton Church, United Church of Christ in West Seattle. We are an immigrant welcoming church with a small task force with huge heart. And we came under that umbrella of immigrant welcoming, even though we were that in the way we defined ourselves. We lived into that the last couple of years as we walked with 3 families who were on an asylum journey up here that happened to walk into one of our sister churches one day in the middle of their prayer time, asking if there was a way for them to get some food and some shelter. Some resources for their a little baby that they had because their sponsorship had fallen through. And that sister church reached out to us and said, what love can we provide together? And along that way, we learned our way into being an immigrant welcoming church. And along that way, the stories of these three families and the journey, the part of the journey that we have walked with them has changed this congregation. It has opened our hearts. It has opened our eyes to how challenging and occasionally inhumane the system can be. That is without othering other people within that system, but the way it has been built. I think the whole time we were down in Brownsville, the refrain from our group was, we say the system is broken, but what we kept saying back to that is actually in some ways it's working exactly as it seems to have been built to work and needs to be torn down to the ground and rebuilt with some humanity. So because of my experience here with those families, when Tyler reached out and when Ali reached out with this invitation, my heart and my voice said, yes, 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 as quickly as possible. This is where I want to be. I'd heard the stories of these families, but to put yourself in place is a whole other experience. So I told my congregation just the other day, my bags, I unpacked those very quickly, but my heart, I am still working on that. It is going to take me some time to unpack my heart, to find some words to share the story. But my experience in getting back in the middle of the night, the other night, was to hop into a taxi and to have a taxi driver ask me, where have you been? What have you been doing? And I was down at the border. And then there was just this flow of conversation all the way as he dropped me off, asking me, what is it like for people to come across? Is this true? Is this true? Is this true? Till I got out of the cab and he said, God bless you on the journey you've been on, and thank you for sharing with me. What should I do? I said, the next person who gets into your cab, you treat them with compassion and kindness, and I will do that with the next person I see. We'll start there, and then we'll figure the rest out together. So I think what I have brought back from this trip is tremendous gratitude to Reverend Ali for the way she started this trip. It started with an email that said, this is not a mission trip. This is a trip of listening and witness, to really be fully present. Let people, whoever they were, tell their stories, and to be engaged and to sit down beside people and to hear them and to ask questions from a place of curiosity and wonder about who people were. And then to get there and be in place there in Brownsville and on the other side of the border, and to have what we know complicated by stories that rub up against each other. The first story we heard, which was really a practice narrative, but still the story we heard came from the Border Patrol. Sergeant Rodriguez, who stood there and told us his perspective on how things are. And it started up here at this sort of official level with graphs and charts. But I think our willingness to hold back and not even other, Sergeant Rodriguez and the work that he was doing, even though we could feel where maybe stories didn't feel quite true to us, but to let him just be open and share and be present, all of a sudden took him from here to let us know how he has come to be in this space and what has created this narrative, whether we agree with it or not. To learn from him, he began as a 17-year-old in this process. Because that's where opportunity was. Employment is a hope for a lifetime pension. If you work there till you're 50 years old, you didn't need a college degree, lots of those kinds of things. But more than that, to start that journey at 17 of being shaped by a narrative that is about patriotism and about protecting America and feeling truly America in that narrative that he is telling, to present this narrative that is about this collective threat that is right up against our border, to use statements that tell us that everyone crossing is illegal, or somehow that the cartel is right up against the gate, or that there is a concern for trafficking. And there is a truth thread woven through that, but there is this hypervigilance in the way that it is told and the way he has absorbed that, this hypervigilance of violence and his feeling of his purpose and role in protecting those on this side of the gate. And I, just as an example, then we go across the border and we meet Lulu Gonzalez of Casa Lulu, and listen to her story. And she started when she was 16 years old. So in that same sort of formative period of her life, crossing over the border and helping the people who are unsheltered on the border, crossing over with her father and helping in that, at that time of life of crossing back and forth and bringing whatever kind of compassionate support she could find to those who are most vulnerable, until it reached this point of truly focusing all of her heart on the ministry of those who are migrants on the other side. And from that, you hear her talk about people not as illegal and cartel and at this level, but you hear her talk about people by name and the country they've come from and the story that they've carried with her. She knows them all in that context. The children of God, another human being, a neighbor, somebody who is person to person. She has broken down that kind of border that maybe Sergeant Rodriguez has put around his heart and come down to that personal level of who she is helping. And from that, she has created a safe place of hope and healing for people who have come through hopeless situations with people who have experienced torture or have survived these long journeys, or who are sick, or who are waiting patiently and uncertain about when they will be called to try to legally cross the border. In a place where, because we have put up that border fencing that Reverend Ali talked about, we have created a space of exploitation, because we have forced people who are so vulnerable to stay in a space where this liminal space where there is safety on one side, and we have pushed up and created by our system a place of feeling unsafe on the other. But you meet Pastor Lulu you meet Lulu on the other side, and you just feel her heart for this work. You realize that there's nothing else she can do. This is a lived, fierce, embodied love that she has. And from there, We go to Casa del Migrante and meet 4 nuns about 75 years of age who are just as fierce, Sister Maria, Sister Edith, just as fiercely setting up their next place of compassion that is an antidote and a healing place and a place of safety. And then we go from there to La Posada on the other side of the border, where we meet 2 more women, Sister Therese and Sister Nora, who are setting up another holding space of hospitality in this journey that is so challenging and so difficult. And then Team Brownsville, who are getting people tickets and something to eat before they get on buses, and a last friendly face and a last friendly blessing before they move on. All these spaces along the way in an inhospitable system that allows people to have this deep drink of hope that will keep them going, because the other thing that we witnessed is there's no going back. The going back is not a question. The going back, there is this hope to move forward because what's behind them has been so difficult. So my takeaway is their stories and the complexity that Reverend Ali invited us to experience, so that we even take down the walls of this is good and this is right and this is wrong and this is legal and this is whatever, to just see that there are people in the system and all are affected in some way. And what is the next step that we need to take? And my takeaway coming home is that there are people across the border like Lulu and Sister Maria and Sister Edith who are risking their own welfare and dedicating their lives and limited resources wherever they can find them to create healing, community, love, respect in the midst of all this. And the least we can do, and our greatest responsibility, is to remember that when they show up on our doorstep at our places, how are we going to become the receiver, the next receiver in that chain of compassion, of hope and restoration as they continue along this asylum-seeking journey that doesn't end in Brownsville, but comes all the way up to Seattle. And the hope is that there will be home eventually along this way. So I'm feeling that responsibility. That's what I came back with. We are a part of building those spaces of reception and hospitality and love that Lulu started on the other side. And that's what I'm feeling dedicated to going forward. So that's my story for now.
Thank you, Reverend Keren. Before we hear from Pastora Keren, we're going to see a couple photos from our delegation trip. So this is at La Posada, image of the Virgen, and these were rosaries that were brought by people from their countries of origin. And once they got to La Posada, which is a place of refuge on this side of the border, they gave their rosaries to the Virgen as a thank you for the journey and for the safety that they found along the journey. We also got to celebrate with UCC RGV because it was their 1-year anniversary the Saturday that we were there. And so we got to participate, many of the folks in the delegation got to participate in that service. And this is the vice moderator of the South Central Conference, Arlene. And then Reverend Ali and Reverend Lorraine Zeniceros serving communion during that service of celebration. And Ken was one of the folks who went with us. This was at Lulu, at Lulu's place, taking notes diligently as we heard the stories of what was going on in that place. And then this was a duck that was with us. Do we have a picture of it on top of the... So this duck, when it saw us in the park next to the wall, jumped up and came over the wall looking for food. And it was poignant to see an animal that we know that these walls are terrible, terrible for our non-human neighbors, and as terrible as they are for us. And, but this duck that didn't know what a border was, only knew that it was looking for life and more life with these humans who had showed up. So we might have some time for some more photos. This is us at the border, but we'll stop sharing photos now and invite Pastora Keren.
Thank you, Reverend Tyler. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Linda Jaramillo, and everybody else who have been involved in inviting me. My name is Keren Rodriguez, and I am a lay assigned pastor in a church in Aloha United Methodist Church closer to Portland. And I also serve as an organizer with the Interfaith Movement for Immigrant Justice in Oregon. And so I think for me, this was a really important trip to do. I had been invited to many of these border immersions personally, and I always made the decision to not come, not because I didn't, I was not interested, but I was always more focused in my own, trying to do my own organizing in my own community and trying to do the work that I could do for migrants. I'm also an immigrant person. I was born and raised in Honduras until I was age 11. And then with my father, who is ordained elder in the United Methodist Church, we travel multiple places. So immigration and displacement of peoples is something that I've lived and I've encountered throughout my life. And so for me, this was not necessarily like a new environment in which I was at. I've currently in my local church, we have opened our parsonage in the past for 5 asylum seeker young men who came from Venezuela. And in it, we are still accompanying them in their journey through the U.S. In addition to that, as an organizer at IMIRJ, I am also currently working to help restructure this nonprofit. And currently some of the services that we do is accompaniment for these folks that need to go to ICE hearings and, accompaniment through whether they need their ID cards to go to the DMV, or they need to have their checks be paid, or anything that they don't understand for the culture, right? You're coming from the South and you don't really understand how things work. And so the accompaniment program is guided to that, to accompany them. And in addition to that, we also have had a resettlement program through IMIRJ, which is now called Host, Homes, and Hope, which has been now focused on helping resettle asylum seekers into houses of parishioners. Whether you have an extra room or not, you can go and live there for 3 months until the person is able to secure a work permit and find a more sustainable status so that they're able to find a housing thing. So for me, housing, immigration, and racism are all intersectionalities. And I think that for me, seeing asylum seekers across the border, hearing some of the stories I think that Reverend Keren was sharing are not stories that I have not heard, right? I have definitely heard them. But for me, what was shocked was to actually see how disassuated people were in the experience of traveling. I have working for a migrant community in Oregon versus being at the border really made me realize that people come with a shock in their face that they're still trying to understand or maybe avoid what just has happened to them in their mental health. One of the stories that really was impactful for me, I can tell you multiple, but I'm choosing to tell you three. The first one is from Luis, who is a Venezuelan asylum seeker who we met in La Posada, which is is an effort created by Catholic charities. And what that was really like a brief conversation. And my partner is from Venezuela. So in case you don't know, many people from Venezuela are coming to the United States. And in order to come to United States, you have to pass through this thing called the Darien Gap, which is a jungle between Colombia and Panama, because all throughout our American continent, there is this road called Ruta Panamericana, Pan American route, and it's really a way for cars and people to go. But for some reason, these routes does not exist in Colombia or Panama. And so what happens is that these migrant people that are walking have to cross this jungle, and they also have to cross rivers, and in it there's dead bodies and all of this other stuff that happens to them. And me, thinking, I said, oh, I bet that the most difficult thing for you was to cross the Darien Gap, with your family. And I think Luis is in the United States now with his wife and his two daughters. And surprisingly, Luis said, no, that was not the most difficult thing. He said, I crossed the Darien Gap twice. The first time was to bring my wife, and then the second one was to bring my daughters. And I would do it again if I had to. But the most difficult part for me was when I arrived to Mexico, because I was walking. People knew that I had a different accent, that I didn't understand the culture in Mexico. And this ended up happening that, many people take advantage of migrants, right, throughout different countries. And so what happened was that Luis and his wife and his little daughters were kidnapped by the cartels in Mexico. And Luis is telling me this, right, as they dissociate, and, and also say, I never really experienced evilness in my life. And I think that this was really it. And the only reason I am here today is because I was able to open the door and escape. And that's the reality of many migrant people, right? Throughout their journeys, there are many people who are actually making money or finding ways to actually, make profits out of it. And so I think that story, like that Luis, really touched me, because it really makes you wonder about the grassroots effects of why people are migrating here in the first place. And I think that was a conversation. This is how it's linked to these other two stories that I'm telling you. The next one is having a conversation at La Casa del Inmigrante, at the house of the immigrant, with Sister Maria and Lulu. We were having a circle there, and we were talking about how safe really La Casa del Inmigrante is. And I, as a Global South person, I have known of UNUD and all of these United Nations organizations that are helped there to be peacemakers, right, in these sort of situations. And so I had seen many posters, and I had said to Sister Maria, I said, where is the UN in all of this? Like, where is your international support? And her response was, oh, they don't come here. They don't come here because it is too dangerous for them. There is a travel advisory that you're not supposed to come here. And for me, that was a shock, right? I also have, gone through displacement also because of the violence in Honduras. And I didn't understand, right? I think one of the sisters, I don't know her, remember, she said, that the Gulf Cartel was the one that was empowered in that area. And that, when we asked about safety, like, you don't have people with guns by the gate. They only have this gate. This is a metal, and they have a wire at the top. I don't know the name in English. But, they were hosting 150 immigrants in that center. with very scarce resources and with not a lot of security. And, we had stories about, many of these migrant people who once they were deported and they would be sent back to Mexico, there would be a bus or a car there waiting for them. And then they would get kidnapped. And then they would kidnapped. And the story was that the cartel will do that so that they could get money from the families, right? From the families who were actually benefiting from. And so it was really difficult to understand that even as people were deported, that they were also still getting kidnapped, that their family members still didn't know. And so when we went to La Casa del Inmigrante, you could see that the same, the situation in people's faces, right? And how these nuns, because I come from a family of Catholic, right? These nuns, don't care that their life is at stake, right? Like I think they mentioned a story about a migrant person who was just outside of the Casa del Inmigrante, and the cartel wanted to kidnap them, and the one nun, being like 80 years old, stood up and grabbed the person, and against the people who wanted to kidnap, and said, I have nothing to lose. And they put their bodies and saved this person and brought it back in. And for me, of course, I am Latina, and as a faith leader, right, it really touched me, because they make this decision knowing that they cannot, that the police is also colluded, right, into this situation, that they choose still to make the same work over and over of feeding these hundreds and hundreds of people who come. And one of the things that really, when we talked about something that was concerning, elections are coming up, and one of the questions was really, what is the one thing that is really concerning? And said, how are you preparing for this situation? If one candidate and said, if we ever receive mass deportations, we need to be ready, because we don't have enough food, we don't have enough resources. This is also going to create a lot of, violence. A lot of people will continue to be kidnapped, and it's really going to take a lot. And so, thankfully, those people there in the Casa del Inmigrante receive some psychological help. But it is not enough, right? And with lack of resources, they're still able to fund this. And it also is an invitation, I guess, for, folks, who are in this call. I think, as an organizer, right, here in the US, like we try to do the best that we can, to work for immigrant stuff. But it also, it calls out to really, for us to figure it out, what are the politics, or what are the things that involves us into our long-term grassroots situation, right? These people that had made these decisions to come and cross the Darien Gap, who choose to be or have no way of being in this centers, right? They don't do it just because they want to. It's because they're fleeing violence, they're fleeing situations in their country. And it also is an invitation to really question our government foreign policies. Like, what foreign policies of the US has created for these people to do this, and also climate change, and so I think it's just an invitation for us to really dive deeper. I would even say, if you're also part of the LGBTQIA community, and also that is also part of it, right? Like trans women, face a lot more violence. Even, migrant women, also face a lot more violence. They're used as objects. And so I could continue to talk more about this, but I really think that for me, wherever it is that you're at, I would want to invite you to support your local nonprofits that are doing this, because what happens is, in our case, nonprofits have very limited resources. And a lot of times those resources come from government agencies. And me as a pastor, one of the reasons why I'm a pastor is I find that in our churches, in our faith communities, we have more freedom to do what we can with the resources that we have. And so whether you were thinking about coming to these border trips, immersion trips. I'm still processing, kind of like Keren said. I think I'm currently in Sunnyside, Washington, which is a town that is like 89% Latinx, which produces like a great amount of our food, and it's migrant. And I'm visiting my brother, and I did that part of like my taking care of myself. But I'm still processing this. And so, and I hope that we don't forget, that this is like, I really appreciated the leadership of Pastor Ali, and we need to be doing more of this sort of ministries, that are focused on humans' dignity and that looks into our human trafficking, and these other situations that happen. So thank you.
Reverend Tyler, you were on mute.
Thank you. I said, and now Pastor Lucas.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's good to be here. I'm Pastor Lucas Shurson. I'm the pastor at Faith Lutheran Church of Caldwell, Idaho. I'm a member of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, the UCC's interfaith partners over there. And so much of my experience there at the border was filtered through that lens of ecumenism. I was expecting to see a great deal of it, and we did in terms of faith, seeing the way that the UCC relates to these organizations which are run by nuns, which there's all sorts of beautiful partnerships being forged there. But I was also incredibly pleased to see ecumenism, not just in terms of faith, but also in terms of just the way that these organizations are run. There's this extraordinary diversity in how that's being managed. There on the other side of the border, Clínica Lulu and Casa del Migrante are doing similar work in their calling, but they're so that they've got their own independent ways of doing things. They're so beautifully tailored to the personalities of the people who are doing the work there, and that could be an occasion for sniping. We are doing it right over here at our place, but it's not. These groups trust each other so beautifully and are working together in this mission, regardless of how different their approaches might be or how different their facilities might be. Another place where that really came to me was not just in places where the work itself is being done differently, but where, at least in theory, the mission is different too. Back in Brownsville, we were working with an organization that provides supplies to migrants as they go on after their initial hearings into the United States for further hearings. And the folks at this organization were telling us about how it used to be that they got a lot of time to spend with the migrants. They got to hear stories. They got to know them really. And the city itself was not a fan of that. The city takes this approach of, we want migrants out of Brownsville as soon as we can possibly get them. And that means limiting time outside in the city. And it also means sometimes not being honest. Once you have your initial hearing, you're free to go. And migrants are not always told that. And yet, every day, day after day, the city guides groups of migrants over to Team Brownsville to receive those supplies. These two organizations are not on the same page, and yet they find that one place where they can work together, where they can help. And even in that tiny little bit of overlap, there is ministry to be done. And that was especially powerful for me being where I am, and for all of us in the mainline. I think our churches are not so big that we can do this alone. We, even as the mainline churches gathered together, we can't always do work on the scope that we want. So it's going to mean finding those partners who maybe aren't exactly on the same page with us, and yet we can still find points of overlap. For us here in Idaho, that often means the Church of Latter-day Saints, but for you all in your context, that might mean something different. It reminded me of that Fred Rogers quote from his mother, that when you see stuff that's scary on the news, you find the helpers. There are always people who are helping. It's not find the people who are right, or find the people who you like spending time with, or the people that you agree with, but the helpers, regardless of what that looks like. And this really is work for everyone. One of the most powerful memories for me was over at Lulu's clinic, and Reverend Ali gave a package to Lulu that was sealed. Lulu opened it and peeked inside and said, "Oh, this stuff is like gold to us." And I thought it was going to be some kind of prescription, maybe antibiotics, some kind of like medicine that was hard to find on that side of the border. Then Lulu opened the package further and pulled out 500 tablets of acetaminophen. It was the need was so great that even those acetaminophen tablets that you get at Costco here were needed. And that was such a powerful metaphor for me of the ways that we can be a part of this. We in the mainline love experts and expertise. And it's true that that creating a real change on the border will take prescription grade solutions. It will take a great deal of action, but even for those of us who, don't consider ourselves equipped to be writing prescriptions, over-the-counter stuff is still helpful. The most basic, fundamental action to advance human rights there, that is still going to do something. And that's something that each one of us has a role in, and something that I'm very grateful to be taking back to Idaho thanks to this group. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. There was a question that was put in the question box about when are you going to organize a trip for me? And so I wanted to say that part of the ministry of UCC RGV is providing leadership for people who want to do an immersion trip, and I'm putting their website in the chat. And we also have the Good Shepherd in Sahuarita in Arizona, which also is another UCC church that has been doing border immersion trips for many years. And so those are two places where you can do that.
Tyler, if I may jump in real quick.
Yes.
The Good Shepherd in Green Valley, Sahuarita, Arizona, has their Common Ground on the Border conference that is coming up in January. So you can the website will be done by the end of this month. I know because I'm an associate pastor there. The website will be done at the end of the month, but you can just Google Common Ground on the Border. And the conference will be held there on Thursday, January 16th through Sunday the 19th. And there's border immersion trips there as well. Thank you for letting me jump in.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm going to let Reverend Ali have the last word. We're getting down to the end of our time.
Yes, I just want to thank everybody for this opportunity to just each of you. I heard that these were transformational moments for you in the planning, in the attending, and in the post. And I want to just invite just deep gratitude and breaths for each of you, for the work that you are continually doing to support our siblings who are migrating here in this country, for asking the difficult questions, for seeing the things that some of us aren't trained to see or even know to look for, and bringing it all forward through story and through excursions and opportunities for us to build and connect. There is so much work to be done, beloveds. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for your gifts, for your labor, for the emotional labor that goes into this as well. I've been doing immigration work for quite a bit of time, and I know the things that we carry with us. And so grateful for each of you. I want to, before I turn it back over to you all, I just want to say thank you so much for each of you for joining us today for this special offering. What a great turnout. You can review a recording of this later on our YouTube page. I hope that you follow each and every one of these congregations and these faith leaders to see and learn more about the work that we're doing. And then we're back here tomorrow. We're back here tomorrow for a wonderful, another Nurture the Soul at our regular time though. And we're gonna be joined by a number of partners that are going to be talking to us about what it means for us to live into what we call a purple church. In the denomination like the United Church of Christ, what does it mean for us to lead a purple church, to attend a purple church, meaning a church with members across the political spectrum in the midst of a culture that is so becoming even more so increasingly divided and siloed? Our panelists are going to explore what this looks like in our rural and suburban settings of the UCC, as well as what our ministry is being called to do in this time. So join us tomorrow at 3:30. You can register on any of our social media pages. But that is enough of me. I want to turn it back over to you all to share some final thoughts. Thank you so much.
Why don't we have Pastor Ellie Lopez say some final words, and then you can also offer us a benediction.
Sounds good. Thank you, Reverend Tyler. Yeah, the work continues to be done, and I just want all of us to keep in mind that although there might be some slight changes when a different party is in power, until there is a deep change to our immigration culture and rules in our country, unfortunately, the deep problem will continue. The people are still going to be having the difficult journey, and the difficulties are going to continue until a deep change happens. So as we go back into our daily lives, I just want us to hold the memory of the stories that we heard today, that we remember that above all, God is a God that knows no boundaries or borders, that those we created ourselves. Therefore, it is with love and grace that I offer that if God has no difference between borders, who are we to put those on people or impose those in one another? So I bless the hand of your labors, your heart as you are transformed, and your mind as you continue to seek to see God in one another, that we can continue to see God beyond any borders or boundaries, and that we realize that there's more strength and power when we gather with God together. So together we go in peace, knowing that God is our witness, and that we'll speak the truth, and that God will continue to bless our hands. Amen.
Siblings in Christ, if you were moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.